Hello, citizens of the internet. My name is AJ. I am the A to Z artist. Today I'm the A to Z vlogger because this is my second vlog video, and welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing, as I said, my second episode of vlogging. When I did my first video where I did my Disney pin collection, I'll leave that linked down below. I mentioned I wanted to kind of try different formats, different styles of video for this vlogging series. The reason why is that I wanted to explore my nerdy interests, and there's a lot of nerdy interests in this little head of mine. So I wanted to explore my collectibles, I wanted to explore things like the art and artists that inspire me, but I also wanted to review some of the books and stories that I intake all the time. Today, that story is going to be a Star Wars comic book, because I love comics and I love Star Wars anything, so any chance I get to read a Star Wars comic is a given, and the Star Wars comics Marvel is putting out right now are fantastic, like brilliant. That being said, the comic I'm reviewing today isn't my favorite, but it's still good. You'll hear more about that when you get into the review, but I just wanted to put that out there. The comic I'm going to be reviewing today is Screaming Citadel, which is a crossover event comic between the Dr. Aphra and Star Wars series in the Marvel Universe. And to talk about this, I'm going to have to delve into some spoilers, so proceed at your own risk, I guess, but my threshold for spoilers is a lot higher than most people's. For the most part, I try to keep most of the spoilers to the first issue, so the first just fifth of the story. That's about what I would expect from most reviews today. If I include pages from the first issues, they're all going to have all their text in them, stuff like that. Or there are a few later on in the series where I will include some with text, like there's a conversation between Dr. Aphra and Luke that I have kept the text in because it's important, the context for what I am dealing with in that section. So like I'm dealing with characterization, I leave the text in. For the most part though, I leave all story spoilers out. That's just what I try to do my best on, is keeping you uninformed about what happens in full detail in the story. But yeah, if you like this video, be sure to hit that thumbs up button. Subscribe if you like my channel. Hit the bell if you want to get notified for my future videos. And leave a comment down below if you agree, disagree, or neutral about my opinion on this book. Do you like Star Wars comics? Let me know down below. But without further ado, let's get into it. I went into Star Wars The Screaming Citadel with certain expectations. When I was reading reviews and everything on the book, one word kept jumping out at me. It was horror. I love the horror genre. It's one of my favorite genres of all time, and as a genre, it is almost always exciting, even when the story is really bad. And when I say really bad, I mean really bad. It's always exciting. It's always fun, and that's why I love horror. There's always a jump to the system, even if the story is really, 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 really bad. With that said, I was super excited to read Screaming Citadel. Not only did it combine two of my favorite things, Star Wars and horror, but it was written by two of my all-time favorite writers of comic books. Jason Aaron made his name in comics writing crime fiction, but his audience boomed when he moved over to Marvel and took on the Thor God of Thunder run in 2012. In his time on Thor, he wrote some of the best story arcs in the character's history. From the God Butcher arc, featuring one of the God of Thunder's best villains, to taking the hammer away from Thor and giving it to Jane Foster, and finally concluding his massive 8-year-long run on the character with the incredible and nearly perfect, in my opinion, War of the Realms arc. Jason Aaron is one of Marvel's current driving forces. Kieran Gillen, the other co-creator of this series, is known more for his creator-owned projects, at least for me. His series, The Wicked and the Divine, is peak British urban fantasy, imagining the gods of old coming back into our modern world as pop stars and dealing with the consequences of their arrogance and fame. His other creator-owned series that I have read, Die, is a love letter to Dungeons & Dragons. Sarcastically dubbed Punk Rock Jumanji, Die follows a group of people who, as kids, were sucked into a fantasy role-playing game to horrific consequences. But more importantly for this particular video, his final project that I want to mention is his pivotal run on Darth Vader, one of the only mainstream works of his that I have read. And to be honest, it is hard to find a better writer for the character. Gillen has an obvious fondness for the Dark Lord of the Sith, and plays on the character's past as Anakin Skywalker, while also playing out the incredible moment where Vader discovers that his children survived, proving that the Emperor had been lying to him for nearly 2 decades. See, the thing with Screaming Citadel is that the internet really enjoys this crossover event, and I don't blame them. It's really fun, it's really high action, but where I differ from the internet is I don't think it's my favorite Star Wars story, and that's why I wanted to get my review to you. This was incredibly surprising to me, as I am hugely defensive of everything Star Wars. Star Wars works incredibly well because it allows for so many different varying story types. Mostly it is science fantasy, focused on the combination of the magic-like force and the high technological society of the galaxy far away. However, as we've seen in the movies and television alone, we have a possibility for so much more. War narratives, we have coming-of-age stories, heist stories, political intrigue, even stories influenced by films like Seven Samurai. Star Wars is a blank canvas, allowing creators to just go wild and have fun and come up with new story ideas. It allows them to stretch their creative muscles, and that almost always leads to a varied and entertaining experience. Screaming Citadel should have worked. It really should have. And on many levels, it does. But for me, it just doesn't play to my personal tastes. Now, that might be different for you. You might adore this comic, and that's great. I want to hear about that. Tell me about that in the comments. But this is a review, so it's my own personal opinion. So I just want to let you know that I'm not a huge fan of this story. Screaming Citadel is a crossover event comic. For those new to the medium, a crossover event is a pretty common occurrence in the modern comic book landscape. It is a larger, overarching story that draws in characters and series from across a shared universe. This series, for example, brings together the main Star Wars series, written by Jason Aaron, and the Dr. Aphra series, featuring a character created by Kieran Gillen. Dr. Aphra is a rogue archaeologist. Think Indiana Jones without the moral compass. Her primary goal, her main motivation from her first appearance working with Darth Vader to this series, is to learn as much as she can about the past, and she is willing to break whatever laws and customs she can to achieve that goal. She has wronged nearly every character of the main cast of Star Wars at some point, and has been a constant thorn in the side of our heroes from the beginning. Screaming Citadel #1 starts with Aphra approaching Luke Skywalker in a rundown bar on a distant planet. Luke and the rebels have taken the nearly uninhabited planet as an outpost after the reveal of their base at Yavin 4 in A New Hope. Aphra approaches Luke, and after a bar fight ensues, the people there don't much care for the rogue archaeologist. Aphra proposes Luke a deal. He is downtrodden after the death of his master, Obi-Wan Kenobi. He has no one to teach him the ways of the Force. Aphra, meanwhile, has discovered something that might help him. Long ago, an ancient Jedi named Rur copied his consciousness into a crystal computer. Aphra is willing to give Luke Rur if he can help her activate the crystal and learn from it. The catch is that Luke can't open it himself, and they need the help of a queen on a distant planet. Once a year, this queen holds a party where she seeks out some of the most unique organic creatures in the galaxy. She is essentially immortal, so those who sate her boredom, she rewards them handsomely. Luke, being the last of the Jedi, is a particularly unique being. The Queen has a special interest in Luke and his Force abilities, but are her intentions as pure as they might at first seem? The first issue of the story does an incredible job building up the foundations of this really creepy and unique horror-infused story. As Luke and Aphra's team arrive on Katath-Aten, the creepy overtones are just immediate. They hit you hard. And they only increase when you see the Queen and her minions. Gillen clearly is playing off of Dracula tropes, and it feels really fresh and unique in a way that most Dracula type stories haven't in a long time. The problem is that this sense of drama and creepiness just doesn't continue throughout. It drops off almost immediately in favor of typical Star Wars action and adventure. This isn't necessarily a bad thing, as it does feel like a Star Wars story. It isn't badly written by any means. Aaron and Gillen accomplish so much throughout these issues, and tell a story that feels wholly Star Wars throughout. My problems may stem from my expectations, as I mentioned earlier. I was told to expect a Star Wars horror story. I got elements of a Star Wars horror story from the first issue, but then I didn't get any more. There are some great horror moments that play on classic tropes. The zombified masses of the Queen's entourage, the Saw body horror-esque torture devices the Queen employs, the entomophobia-inducing parasites that the Queen uses to control her brood. There's even a great allusion to werewolf-style tropes when one of the parasites infects Black Chrysanthemum, Afra's Wookiee bodyguard. The problem is that these elements don't stick around. They are addressed and then they are just gone. Within the course of 2 pages, Luke and Afra deal with the Queen zombies. The Saw elements are never fully explored, and the werewolf moments, while very cool, never really affect the story all that much. The story can feel really rushed. This is just a problem with event comics in general. It's not a single issue with Screaming Citadel. It's with all event comics. 5 issues where 2 writers must work together to tell a cohesive, universe-spanning story. That's not easy. Few people can do it right. In terms of Star Wars, in terms of the action you'd expect from the galaxy far, far away, it works. It does work. It has all the things you'd expect from a typical Star Wars story. But the things that drew me in, the horror elements that I wanted so badly from the story, were never fully addressed. All of that being said about the story, the writers do one thing brilliantly above all the rest. They characterize the hell out of our lead characters. Throughout the event, Luke and Afra are played off of each other to brilliant effect. They are perfect foils to each other. Afra has experienced all of the worst the galaxy has thrown at her. She is scarred and cynical, but that cynicism leads to knowledge. She knows how to handle that dark side better than anyone else. Meanwhile, Luke is the innocent little farm boy. He too has experienced the worst in the galaxy, but somehow he has maintained his innocence. Afra has a deep respect for Luke, and yet she is motivated by her own issues, constantly falling in and out of trust with him. This dynamic works so well in this story, and it is definitely one of the highest points. The other high point comes in the form of BT-1 and 000, the so-called murder droids of Afra's team. This pair is the R2-D2 and C-3PO of Afra's team, an astromech and a protocol droid that act as comedic relief throughout. However, they do so in a way that is wholly unique to these characters. BT-1 is a modified astromech, one outfitted to be the perfect assassin. He has deployable guns of all shapes and sizes, and it is so damn ridiculous how all of those weapons fit inside his little body. Like, how? 000, meanwhile, isn't actually a protocol droid. He is a corrupted program, one who developed the belief that by killing and draining the blood of organics, he can achieve a form of self-actualization. The pair are so dark and macabre, but as a comedic element, they are absolutely brilliant in this setting. Han, Leia, and Sana, the other hallmarks of the comic book run, don't get as much of a focus in this story. Nevertheless, Aaron and Gillen do a decent enough job of making them believable. They feel like the characters we've grown to know and love. We don't need much more than that, as they aren't our main focus. The biggest problem for this story is the new additions. The villains just aren't that interesting. They are creepy and incredibly well designed visually. They feel like they should be these brilliant horror villains. However, they really don't pose that much of a threat to the heroes.
Bombanax, this super soldier character that defends the Screaming Citadel and its queen, is taken out within a couple of pages once the action starts ramping up. They aren't the persistent threat of the Emperor or Vader. More than that, their origins, their motivations, nothing of their deeper characters comes out. We know nothing about the Queen. I am fine not knowing or caring about her underlings, but the Queen, the main leading villainess, why don't we know more about her?
As an artist, I keep a special eye on the artwork of every comic book I read. Overall, the art is the sole reason I gravitate towards comics over novels or any other medium. Most of the art in Screaming Citadel is pretty good. Nevertheless, any comic book that has 3 separate artistic teams is going to have its ups and downs. It's going to feel inconsistent. And that might be my biggest issue with the artwork here. It feels inconsistent.
The first issue, penciled by Marco Cicchetto and colored by Andres Mossa, is by far some of the best art in the comic book medium. Cicchetto is one of the major rising stars in the modern Marvel landscape. And what he does in his sole chapter and the covers throughout are absolutely incredible. He perfectly captures the horror undertones throughout his work, and every page is a thrill to read. His art is so beautifully dynamic and interesting, and the coloring done by Massa is absolutely incredible. Meanwhile, we have an artist like Salvador Larroca. I'm not saying Larroca is a bad artist, far from it. I would never say that. His work on capturing the character likeness of the original Star Wars cast is spot on. He does manage to capture the mood with these heavy spot blacks and some really creepy designs. However, I find his work incredibly inconsistent. His character faces and the robotics and the landscapes are heavily detailed. However, you get to elements like armor and other elements of the scene dressing, and he barely details those at all.
I understand this difference in detail as a decision that the artist must consciously make. He probably used it to draw the eye of the reader to areas of importance. That is good storytelling, and I respect that. I just personally don't like it. It's not my favorite art style. That's not a shot against Salvador Larroca. He's a fantastic artist. It's just not something I'm drawn to.
The final artist for this series is Andrea Briccardo, and his work does really appeal to me. It is in a very cartoony and simple style, which might sound like an insult, but I definitely mean that as a compliment. His work has all of the energy and style of a Saturday morning cartoon. The creepier overtones of the story are less apparent in his art, but that isn't a big problem. He manages to capture the intensity of the Star Wars action, as well as the overall trippy feel of Gillen's more psychological scenes. Overall, I really loved Briccardo's work.
Overall, this isn't a bad Star Wars story at all. In fact, if it wasn't for my initial expectations that this was going to be the peak Star Wars horror experience, and I know I got my expectations up too high, this is my fault, this could have been one of the most unique and interesting story experiences in the Star Wars universe. Now, I didn't necessarily get the experience I wanted, but does that mean I don't recommend this book? No, not at all. I definitely recommend this book. Screaming Citadel is a great Star Wars adventure. It's fun, it's fast-paced, it's action-packed. The characterization of our heroes is brilliant. Luke and Aphra. Luke in the original trilogy is kind of one note. He's always this perfect hero. There's nothing that he can do wrong, and that is kind of the fun fact. That's kind of the fun thing about Luke Skywalker. Now, this story gives him a little more depth. It makes you feel like he's got flaws, and those flaws are apparent in the fact that he just doesn't understand the universe at large. He's still this innocent farm boy that hasn't experienced everything in the universe. Contrast that with Aphra, who is this super experienced, super kind of over the top and kind of scary presence that you just can't trust. That just works so well. I was a bit disappointed with some of the art and some of the characterization of the villains, but overall, those are things I can look past. I do like the story, and if I hadn't had those high expectations going into it, I think my experience with it would have been that much better. So yes, I definitely would recommend this story. It is definitely worth a read, especially if you're going through the initial Star Wars run. There's just some things in here that do pertain to further issues down the line. Would I say it's the best Star Wars story ever written? No, definitely not. Does it need to be? No, definitely not. It's fun as it is. It's a good read. It's a high-paced adventure. Just go into it without the horror expectations and you'll get a good story, I think. But that's my review, so let's get to the outro and I'll see you later. So there is my review of Screaming Citadel, the crossover event between Dr. Aphra and Star Wars. I hope you liked that one. I was really proud of how this video turned out in general, just the amount of editing and just playing around with kind of the Ken Burnsy moving pictures look. I'm kind of a documentary nerd. I'm getting more into documentaries as time goes by, but let me know, do you like this format? Should I play with it a little more? I want to do more reviews in the future because I'm reading comic books every day. I'm reading books every day. Let me know. I'd like to hear what you guys think. If you want more of this, let me know down in the comments. Again, let me know if you like Star Wars down in the comments, what Star Wars stories you like the best. You can also answer my question of the week from my last video, my Dino Racers video, which I'll leave linked down below. That question is, what is your favorite dinosaur? I did, like I said, Dino Racers, so that was my video idea for the last video, and that got me kind of excited and going, so thought I'd ask about dinosaurs. But this video is about Star Wars, and be sure to answer those questions also. Be sure to hit the thumbs up button if you like this video. Hit subscribe if you like my channel. I do lots of nerdy stuff like this all the time. Mondays and Fridays I post. And hit the bell to get notified for whenever I drop a video. I'll see you guys on Monday. It's my Father's Day video, so get excited for that because I got some cool stuff coming for that. But in the meantime, be safe, be kind, and have a little fun this weekend. Bye! Okay, back that up a little. No, that's as backed up as it gets, I guess. I'm getting distracted by the rain. Hit the bell if you want to get notified.